The encounter nobody expected. Have you ever stopped to think about what happens in the final seconds of life? I am not talking about fictional stories or elaborate theories. I am talking about what Smith Wigglesworth, a man who brought resurrection to dozens of dead people, experienced personally when he crossed the line between life and eternity. Smith Wigglesworth was not a distant philosopher sitting in an ivory tower. He was a preacher of power, a living miracle. He was a man who walked into hospitals and saw blind eyes open. He prayed over paralyzed bodies and watched them stand up and walk. He commanded dead hearts to beat again, and they did. And then, during one night in 1922, something happened to him that Jesus himself had warned his disciples about. When Wigglesworth came back from that experience, his message rewrote how the church understands resurrection. Picture this moment with me. You are sleeping peacefully. Your body suddenly fails. Your heart stops beating. Your breath ceases. And then, without warning, you find yourself standing in the presence of the Son of God. Not in a dream, not in some vague spiritual imagination, but in an encounter so real, so vivid, so undeniably present, that when you finally wake up, you are fundamentally different. You are not the same person anymore. That is exactly what happened to Smith Wigglesworth. And the message that Jesus gave him during those moments is so revolutionary, so different from what most people believe about death, resurrection, and eternal life, that we are going to explore every detail together today. Because this is not just about one man who died and came back. This is about you. This is about what you believe happens when everything ends. This is about the reality of power, purpose, and eternity. Wigglesworth spent decades witnessing miracles that defied all logic and explanation. Yet even with all those incredible signs and wonders surrounding his life, nothing could have prepared him for what he would experience in death. And when he returned, when he came back and took his next breath, he carried a message that would challenge everything he had preached before. The question everyone asks is simple but profound. Why would Jesus visit Smith Wigglesworth in death? Why not someone else? Why this particular man? The answer lies in understanding that Wigglesworth had already died 1,000 times in his spirit. He had already surrendered everything to God. He had already given up his own will, his own desires, his own dreams. So, when physical death came, Jesus met him there. Before we continue any further, I want to ask you something personal. I want to know what brought you here today. If you have ever had a spiritual experience that completely transformed your faith, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment right now. If you have ever had a question about death and resurrection that nobody could answer, share it with me. If you are searching for something deeper, something more real than what the world offers, tell me in the comments section below. I genuinely want to know what brings you to this moment. Your story matters. Your questions matter. So please, leave a comment now and let us start this conversation together. Death is a door, not an end. Before we can understand what Jesus told Smith Wigglesworth, we first need to understand the man who received that life-changing message. We need to know his story, his struggles, and his journey, because it is the foundation of everything that follows. Smith Wigglesworth was born in 1859 in Bradford, England. He was the son of a poor carpenter. His childhood was marked by hardship, poverty, and struggle. There was nothing glamorous about his beginnings. There was no indication that this boy would become known throughout the world as the apostle of faith. He became a plumber. He worked with his hands. He lived an ordinary, unremarkable life by all external measures. But then everything changed when he met Polly, a woman of extraordinary prayer and deep faith in Jesus. She did not just believe in God. She lived her faith. She demonstrated it. And when Smith Wigglesworth encountered genuine faith through her, something awakened inside him. It was not just intellectual agreement. It was a burning fire that would consume the rest of his life. Once Wigglesworth truly found faith, he did not simply believe it. He lived it with radical intensity. He prayed with power. He spoke with authority. And miracles followed him everywhere he went. Blind eyes opened when he prayed. Paralyzed people stood up and walked. Deaf ears heard for the first time. And yes, there were those who were clinically dead who came back to life when Wigglesworth prayed in faith. He was not preaching theory. He was not offering philosophical ideas. He was demonstrating living power, real resurrection, real transformation. But in 1922, something unprecedented happened, something that would exceed all the miracles of his entire lifetime. Wigglesworth himself became seriously ill. His body began to fail. His strength diminished. And then, during a night that seemed like it would be his last, he crossed over. His body grew cold. His breathing stopped. For hours, his family surrounded him, believing that Smith Wigglesworth was gone forever. They were preparing for his funeral. They were saying goodbye. This was the moment. This was when the encounter happened. While Wigglesworth was in that place between the living world and the eternal realm, while his body lay still and lifeless, Jesus appeared to him with a message that would change everything. Jesus did not appear as a stern judge. He did not come to condemn or punish. He came as a teacher. He came as a friend. He came with revelation. And the first thing that Jesus communicated to Wigglesworth was this fundamental truth. Death is not final. Death is not the end. Death is not destruction or separation. Death is transition. When the average person thinks about death, they think about endings. They think about loss. They think about permanence and finality. But Jesus showed Wigglesworth something completely different. He showed that from the perspective of eternity, death is simply a door that opens. It is a passageway. It is movement from one reality into another reality. This revelation struck at the very heart of human fear. What Jesus revealed about resurrection, now we arrive at the very heart of this story. Now we discover what Jesus actually told Smith Wigglesworth about resurrection. And I must tell you, it is not what most people expect to hear. It challenges comfortable assumptions. It rewrites popular theology. While Wigglesworth existed in that state between two worlds, he received a series of profound revelations that he would spend the rest of his life preaching and teaching. These revelations were not merely personal spiritual experiences. They were messages meant for the entire church. They were truth meant to transform how we live. The first revelation can be stated simply: resurrection begins now, not later. Most people operate from a different timeline. They think of their lives in stages. First comes living, then comes dying, then comes waiting, then comes the final resurrection. But Jesus showed Wigglesworth that this linear understanding is incomplete and actually false. Resurrection is not merely a future event. It is not something that only happens at the end of time. Resurrection is a continuous process that begins the moment you truly encounter Jesus. It happens every single day. Every time you choose forgiveness instead of bitterness, You are experiencing resurrection. Every time you choose faith instead of fear, you are rising from death into life. Every time you let go of who you used to be and embrace who God is calling you to become, you are participating in resurrection power. Wigglesworth began preaching that you do not have to wait for heaven to experience resurrection. You can experience it today. You can live in it now. You can demonstrate it through your actions, your words, your choices, your faith. The second revelation centers on power that is available in this present moment. Jesus showed Wigglesworth that the same faith that raises the dead is not reserved for some distant future time. It is not locked away in heaven waiting for Judgment Day. That power is alive and active right now. This power is not merely a doctrine to be written on paper or framed on a wall. It is active, living power. It is divine energy available for today. It is your capacity to heal the sick, to restore the broken, to transform impossible situations. The resurrection of Jesus is not simply your ticket to heaven someday. It is your demonstration of power available now. This is why Wigglesworth witnessed so many miracles in his life. He operated from a foundation of resurrection faith, not death consciousness. Every illness, every impossibility, every situation that looked like death, he confronted it with the authority of someone connected to resurrection power. The third revelation is difficult, but essential. Jesus showed that resurrection requires death. This is the part that most people resist hearing. There is no resurrection without death. There is no new life without the death of the old life. There is no transformation without the death of who you were. Real faith demands this. It is not about improving your old life. It is about burying your old life completely and rising as someone entirely new. This requires genuine death. Death to ego. Death to control. Death to the illusion that you can save yourself. Wigglesworth understood that his personal encounter with physical death was not random or accidental. It was Jesus teaching him through lived experience that genuine resurrection requires genuine death first. When you truly understand these three revelations, everything changes. Your priorities shift, your values transform. Your entire approach to life becomes different because you stop trying to fix the old and start living the new. How to live in resurrection today? The question that every person asks at this point is direct and honest. This is all well and good for Smith Wigglesworth. They think, but what about me? How does this apply to my actual life? I am not a famous preacher. I do not see dramatic miracles happening every day. I have bills to pay. I have relationships that are complicated. I have doubts. I have fears. I have ordinary problems. This is exactly why the message of Wigglesworth matters so much, because he did not leave resurrection in the realm of theory and doctrine. He brought it down into practical, everyday living. He showed how resurrection is not just for spiritual giants, but for ordinary people living ordinary lives. The first principle is learning to recognize death that happens every single day. This might sound strange, but genuine living in resurrection begins with understanding that small deaths are happening constantly. Every time you let go of something, every time you surrender, every time you choose to abandon your own plan for God's plan, you are experiencing a kind of death. And in that death, there is resurrection available. You are facing a disappointment. That is the death of your expectations. But within it is the resurrection of new perspective and deeper wisdom. You are losing something precious. That is the death of one season, but it opens space for the resurrection of the next season. You are being asked to release a dream that belonged to your old self. That is the death of personal ambition, but it is the resurrection of alignment with God's true calling for your life. Wigglesworth taught that recognizing these daily deaths with faith is the pathway to living in continuous resurrection. You do not wait for some future moment. You begin practicing now. The second principle involves operating with the authority that comes from resurrection. Jesus showed Wigglesworth that you have genuine authority, not authority over people, but authority over circumstances. Disease is not more powerful than resurrection. Poverty is not more powerful than resurrection. Fear is not more powerful than resurrection. Death itself is not more powerful than resurrection. When you truly believe this, when this becomes real to you, the way you live changes dramatically. You stop living from a defensive position and start living from an offensive position rooted in faith. The third principle is perhaps the most transformative of all. Live now as if you are already resurrected. Do not postpone your transformation until some future date. Do not wait for circumstances to change before you change. Die now to insecurity, to regret, to shame, to fear. Resurrect now in new identity. Speak now as one who is risen. Act now with authority. Love now without attachment to outcome. Work now with genuine joy instead of anxiety. Because resurrection is not merely an event from 2,000 years ago or an event reserved for the future. Resurrection is a way of living right now. This is what Wigglesworth discovered. This is what Jesus showed him. And this is what he is showing you today. Smith Wigglesworth died in 1957 at the age of 88. But before he departed this world, before he took his final breath and stepped into the eternity he had glimpsed during that encounter in 1922, he left behind a crystal-clear legacy. His message echoed through decades and continues to challenge us today. He wrote and spoke these words with absolute conviction. The resurrection of Jesus is not merely history. It is your inheritance. It is not simply doctrine to be studied. It is your power. It is not just a distant promise. It is your present reality. This is the core truth that changed everything for Wigglesworth and can change everything for you. You can spend your entire life believing in resurrection as something that happened long ago, or something that will happen in the distant future. You can recite creeds and sing hymns and attend services while never actually experiencing the power of resurrection in your daily life. You can be technically correct in your theology while remaining functionally dead in your practice. Many people do exactly this. Or you can begin today, right now, in this very moment. You can choose to live as someone who has already been raised from the dead. Every time you choose forgiveness, instead of holding on to resentment, you resurrect. Every time you choose to believe God instead of surrendering to fear, you resurrect. Every time you die to yourself and live for your purpose, you resurrect. Every time you speak words of faith instead of words of doubt, you resurrect. Every time you extend love when it would be easier to withdraw, you resurrect. This is not mysticism. This is not abstract spirituality disconnected from real life. This is practical, daily, moment-by-moment choices that align you with resurrection power. The central question that remains is this: will you continue living as though you are dead, waiting for some future moment of resurrection? Or will you begin living today as someone who has already been raised? because this is what Jesus showed to Smith Wigglesworth in those moments between worlds. And now he is showing it to you. He is speaking it to your heart. He is inviting you to stop waiting and start living. He is calling you to die to the old limitations and rise into the new possibilities that only resurrection power can bring. The choice is yours. The power is already available. The door is open. The resurrection life is not somewhere in the distant future. It is here. It is now. It is yours. This is the message that Smith Wigglesworth carried back from death. This is the gospel of resurrection that challenges everything you thought you knew about living. And this changes everything.